Shawano County has more 8-feet square barn quilts on farm buildings, especially barns, than any county in the whole United States, which is pretty amazing.
Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of Wisconsin's Outdoor Explorer podcast. I am your host, Jason. If you've ever driven between Wausau and Green Bay on Highway 29, you've driven through Shawano County, and you've probably noticed some pretty nice-looking barn quilts along the way. And if you didn't know, Shawano County is considered the barn quilt capital of Wisconsin. And on today's show, I talk with the man who made that all happen, Jim Leuenberger. Now, Jim started this project in 2010 after seeing barn quilts in Iowa, Kentucky, Oregon, and southern Wisconsin. And he brought the idea back to Shawano County, where he lived. And it started out as getting 4-H clubs involved in helping make barn quilts to help beautify Shawano County with these beautiful colors and beautiful patterns. And what started out with just a few in the first few months of the project turned out to be over 350 different quilts throughout Shawano County. And because it's the fall season and the colors are beautiful, I thought, what better time to find out more about these quilts than now? Because honestly, what better time to be out there driving around, looking at the fall colors, checking out these barn quilts? It's the perfect way to get out and enjoy the fall season here in Wisconsin. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Jim. He's got a lot of great things to say about the quilts and how this simple idea has put Shawano County on the map, not just in Wisconsin, but throughout the United States. Jim, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you.
What is your first memory of being outdoors?
My first memory of being outdoors, well, I grew up on a farm in northeast Iowa, so I was outdoors a lot, helping my dad, with chores and things. I guess I don't have a specific memory about it, but obviously on a small dairy farm, we were outside a lot.
That's good. I think all of us Midwesterners, especially us Wisconsinites, can relate to something like that. When you're a kid growing up on a farm, you're outside a lot. So that's great. I like to hear that. How did Shawano County become Wisconsin's barn quilt capital?
Back in June of 2010, I came home one day. I don't know where I was, but I came home one day and I told my wife that I thought I was going to try and get a barn quilt project started in Shawano County, and without any real plan in place or in mind. But my wife and I had seen quilts. Being from northeast Iowa originally, there was a lot of quilts in Iowa. We had seen a lot of them in southern Wisconsin, and we go to Kentucky every year to visit my sister down there, and there's quilts there. And in our travels, we had seen quilts in a lot of other states, and so I just got the idea. I was retired, and I thought, I'm just going to see if I can get a barn quilt project started here in Shawano County. And so that was that was June of 2010. I didn't really have an idea of how I was going to go about it, but I know in some states, 4-H clubs had done a quilt as a club project. So I thought, well, Shawano County has a good 4-H program. I'm going to just see if I can get a little time on one of the 4-H leaders' monthly meetings and see if they would be interested in possibly having some of their clubs do a quilt. So I put a little slide presentation together, or a PowerPoint, and of course I had to explain to a lot of people what a barn quilt was, because some people think or thought I was going to be up on a ladder painting a quilt on a barn, or I was going to be hanging a cloth quilt on a barn. But so once I explained to them how they worked, we had 25 clubs at the time, and I think 10 of them said that they would like to do one as a project. So that's kind of how I got started with it. The next step was trying to, find barns where people would be willing to put one. And I actually pinpointed a number of barns in the area so that I really wanted to have a quilt on, because they were beautiful barns. They were in a great spot as far as visibility. just about every person or every farm I stopped at that I explained the project to, they said, yeah, well, we'd like to have a quilt on our barn. And so it just kind of gained momentum from there. And it was amazing how it took off. I mean, I talked to our tourism director here at the chamber and explained to her what it was all about. And she thought this might be something that would be great for tourism. And, looking back 9 years, it's been great for tourism for Shawano County. So that's kind of how the project got started here in the county.
So how many quilts did you start out with that first year?
The first year, in the fall of 2010, we had 3 4-H clubs did a quilt, and so we put 3 of them up in the fall of 2010. Then early in 2011, people were saying, well, how many of these you think you're going to have? And I said, and again, I had no idea, and I said, I hope I can at least get 25. And, well, the first year we put up 96.
Wow. Wow.
And my wife and I painted most of them. Obviously, 4-H clubs did a few, but the Chamber of Commerce has a really nice building here in Shawano, and they let me take over about half of their basement to do the quilts in, where we do the painting. And that was really a great thing for us because we could come here anytime we wanted. The basement was clean and dry and cool in the summer and warm in the winter, and just a perfect place. I couldn't really do it in my garage or in a basement or something like that. It just wouldn't work. And so that was one of the reasons why we had so many, because we had lots of interest and we had a place to paint them, and that really helped a lot. And so we had 96 the first year. The second year we put up 87. So we were off and running.
So I'm guessing once the word got out, were they just coming to you then at that point?
Well, a couple things happened. I talked to our local newspaper because one of the unique things about our project is that I write an article on each one of them. I get some history of the farm. I talk about why they picked a certain quilt pattern, anything else, when the farm was homesteaded, whatever. So I put a nice article together about the quilt and the farm, and then I get a picture of the people with their quilt once it's on their barn. And our local paper has run every single article at no charge with a nice color picture and the whole thing. And once people started seeing the articles in the newspaper, I did radio interviews here on our local station. I did several television interviews on the Green Bay stations, just all kinds of media calling us about this barn quilt deal, what it was all about and all that. So again, once the word got out, people started coming to me a lot. So those first 2 years, I didn't have to go out and beat the bushes, so to speak, to try and get people to get quilts. They were coming to me, and that's one reason, again, why we have so many of them.
How do you come up with that many different designs to make each one a little bit unique and special?
Well, I'm not a quilter. My wife is not a quilter, but through this whole project, we have found that there are literally thousands and thousands of quilt patterns. Fortunately, we found a book in the Shawano Library that has 5,500 quilt block patterns, not specifically for barn quilts, but quilt blocks. The pictures are all about 2 inches square. And so when somebody wants a quilt, I meet with them here at the chamber, and then I can show them where I do the painting and how the process works. And then we start going through the book to see if there's a pattern that they like. And I would guess out of our 352 quilts that we have up now, at least probably close to 300 of them now have come out of that book. It's been a godsend, a great resource for us to find patterns for people. Now, again, as the years have gone by since we started this, people have gotten a little more creative, and they want a quilt personalized maybe a little bit more. So some of our more recent quilts have gotten a little more involved. They take a little more time. And the other thing is, you mentioned that there's a lot of patterns. Well, every single one of our quilts is different. Every one is unique. And with there being thousands of quilt blocks or quilt patterns, there's really no reason to duplicate them, and we haven't. That's what makes it fun for me and my wife to paint them. I mean, every day that we paint, we're doing something different. If I was painting the same thing every day, I don't think I'd have been painting this long, But But it's fun as you add more colors to a quilt pattern. You can see the quilt kind of come to life. It really, starts to take a life of its own, and it just makes it fun. It really does.
How much time do you put into a quilt?
Oh, it varies. When we first started, those first couple of years, we were spending 5-6 hours a day down here painting quilts because we had so many of them to do. Now I'm just painting 2 at a time now, and I spend maybe 1 to 2 hours a day when I'm working on quilts. But when you've done 300 of them, we've probably put in thousands of hours on them. Again, it's been one of the most rewarding things we've ever done. I just can't say enough about the people we've met. We've got this whole new circle of friends now who, I'm guessing maybe 80% of the people we have done a quilt for we never knew before. And even though I've lived in Shawano since 1975, I mean, there's a lot of people around here that I don't know and didn't know. And another thing, that a reason why we have so many quilts is that Shawano County has always been a big dairy county. A lot of the beautiful old barns don't have cows in them anymore, but so many of them have been kept up so nice. They still look nice. People may have had them painted and kept them up. You drive around, I mean, there's a lot of nice barns. People say, aren't you going to run out of barns to put quilts on? And we aren't. I mean, there are so many more barns in the county. It's crazy. I mean, it really is. We do a lot of bus tours. That's another thing that's been amazing is, we do several bus tours a year from all over the Midwest who come here specifically to see the quilts. It's a phenomenon that has just blown my mind.
Yeah.
It really has. These crazy quilts just have really attracted a lot of people.
Well, and I bet it's got to put a smile on your face every time you drive around and see your basically piece of art up in the air for everybody to see. That's got to make you pretty proud, doesn't it?
It does. It really does. And the other thing about Shawano County, too, or another thing, is that it's a beautiful county. I mean, it's picturesque, very scenic. We have lots and lots of maple trees in our county. It's really beautiful in the fall. Even the winters are pretty. I mean, people complain about how cold and all the snow, but on a sunny, cold day in the winter, it can be really pretty. And we have a lot of our quilts on the back roads in Shawano County. Sure, we have them on some of the main roads like Highway 29, just for visibility's sake, and so people are more aware of them, and they probably stop at the chamber and say, what are these all about? And we have a map put together and different routes people can take, so they can drive around and get out on the back roads and see how pretty it is, any time of the year. And we have a Bike the Barn Quilt event that we hold several years now. We've held it, and we have several routes where people can ride their bikes around and look at the quilts. It's been so good for tourism. It really has. Quilts have added that little impetus to get people excited. And we're still getting calls. The whole project has just surprised me, I guess, more than anything, with the acceptance of them and how excited people are of them. And I'll walk into a grocery store or a restaurant and see somebody, and the first thing they say is, what number are you working on now? So, and I know what they're talking about, So, yeah, it's pretty cool.
So do you have a number in your head that you'd like to see the county get to?
I've been asked that several times lately because there was a little lull this summer for some reason. I mean, several weeks I wasn't doing any painting, and then all of a sudden now they've started trickling in again. And like I said, I'm working on number 355 now. I think it would be asking a lot to get to 400. I mean, that's another 45 quilts. I would have to, if I wanted to get to 400, I'd have to go out and work at it and talk to people like I was early on. And so, no, I don't have an end goal in mind. I think I'm just going to kind of leave it open-ended. And when people contact me, I'll work with them and get a quilt for them, and we'll just see where it goes. I mean, I hope I can. I know I'll stay excited about it. I don't know I hope I can stay healthy enough, and I am healthy, but it's something to do in retirement. We don't go anywhere in the winter as far as going away for a few months, so we're around the area. So if people want one, I'm more than happy to do them.
Where does Shawano County rank as far as number of quilts compared to maybe some other counties even throughout Wisconsin and maybe even the Midwest here? Do you know?
Yes, there's a lady whose name is Susie Parent. She keeps track of these. She calls them quilt block trail or quilt trails across the United States, and she has written 2 books. She keeps track of where all these quilts are. There's actually quilts in 48 states now, and she knows that now, let me clarify that first. Our quilts are all 8 feet by 8 feet. And all of our 352 quilts that we have up are 8 by 8 feet. Now, there are a lot of people, and there's a lot of counties around the country who are painting 2 by 2 quilts or 4 by 4 quilts that they put on their house or their garage or whatever. Unfortunately, they call these barn quilts, and they're not barn quilts. They're quilt blocks.
Okay.
So we know that Shawano County has more 8 feet square barn quilts on farm buildings, especially barns, than any county in the whole United States, which is pretty amazing.
That's awesome to hear that.
I told a friend of mine, we're the barn quilt capital of Wisconsin. We really should promote that. So I got the idea to build this sign on the edge of town. It's actually a large billboard that looks like the end of a barn. It's 16 feet high. And it's got an actual 4 by 4 quilt on it that I painted. And then we built this, and it says Shawano County, Wisconsin's barn quilt capital. Our county has more 8 by 8 barn quilts than any county in the country.
That's great. I just love hearing that. That's awesome. What are some of the ways? You talked a little bit about the bike tour, and you said there's a bus tour. What are some of the better ways to get out and see all these quilts? Because to me, this is like the perfect time. You've got all the colors of the trees starting to change. I mean, what better time to be out and checking out all the barn quilts?
The best thing people can do is they could come to the Chamber of Commerce in Shawano. It's on South Main Street in Shawano. They should stop at the Chamber. We have a visitor guide that's free that has a map where all the quilts are located. We have several different brochures that have different routes in them, depending on how many quilts they want to see. So they should stop here, talk to the people here at the Chamber, get a visitor guide, and just get out in their car or on their motorcycle or their bicycle or whatever and drive around and look at the quilts. Shawano County is a large county. There's no question about it. It's 500 square miles. There's a lot of area, but you're right. Some of these back roads with these fall colors are just spectacular. They really are, and the colors are still coming. I mean, they're starting to turn, but but it's still pretty. So I would encourage people to stop here. And one quick little aside, a story. There was a couple in Florida. This was a few months ago, who had never been to Wisconsin, and they Googled things to do in Wisconsin or whatever from their home in Florida, and for some good reason, Shawano County barn quilts came up, and so they drove all the way from Florida to Shawano. They spent 5 days here looking at barn quilts, driving around looking at barn quilts. Isn't that incredible?
That's awesome.
You talk about boosting our economy. I mean, they have to stay somewhere. Yeah. They got to pay for gas. They got to pay for food. Hopefully they did a little shopping. I mean, it's those kind of stories that just make my heart jump, because, they're coming here, to have fun and see something new, and it's just great.
And specifically to come see your barn quilts. That's a great story.
I know.
And then they're probably going back to Florida and telling all their friends what an amazing time and how cool it was to see that. And hopefully they're coming up here and doing the same thing then.
That's exactly right.
Jim, what is your favorite part of doing this project?
The favorite part of doing this project is the people we've met, without a doubt. Like I said a bit ago, probably 80% of the people we have done a quilt for we never knew before. These are such wonderful people. I mean, that's by far the best part of it is the people. I know that it's kind of cliche to say that, but in this case, it's really true. We have so enjoyed it. When I go out to the farm, my wife comes along a lot when we put the quilts up. It's fun talking to the people. They're excited about it. It's just fun. And I do have to also mention that one of our local electricians, Redant Electric is their name, they put up every quilt for us. So I call them when I make arrangements with the people as to when we can put the quilt up. I call them, and then we get it scheduled, and then I go along and help put them up. And so they put up every one of them, and I think they're just as proud of having put them all up as we are as having painted them, because it's part of their legacy too, in a way, because they put them all up. But yeah, the people are so great. I've actually brought people to tears with these crazy things. I had a lady whose husband had died. They were farmers and they were retired, but her husband had died about 3 years prior, and she wanted to have a quilt done for the farm where they were farming. And he was a big deer hunter as well as a dairy farmer, and so she wanted a silhouette of a deer head in the middle. And so we picked out a pattern, and I got the deer head painted and everything, and I had the quilt done, and I called her and I said, I've got the quilt all done here at the chamber if you want to just stop over and see it before we put it up. And well, she said, yeah, I'll come right over. And so she came over, and as soon as she opened the door and saw the quilt, she started crying. And she cried for, I'll bet, 2 minutes. She couldn't even talk. She was so, I'm not sure what the word is. I mean, it meant so much to her, to have that. And when we put the quilt up, she was crying again, which to me was just, I don't know. Every one of these quilts has a story, and it's stories like that. There was one other quick story I'll tell you, that we had put up a quilt. It was in the wintertime, and we actually had put quilts up every month of the year. But we had put this quilt up, and it had been sponsored by a credit union. And several of the board members from the credit union were at the farm when we put the quilt up, and we got it all put up, and I got pictures taken, and so everybody was leaving to go home. And I just pulled away from the farm, and the car in front of me stopped. So obviously I stopped, and the gentleman got out of the car, came back to my car, and I rolled down the window, and I said, yes. And he said, I just want to let you know how much your barn quilts mean to people. And I said, well, that's great. I mean, what do you mean specifically? And he says, well, my wife died 3 weeks ago. And the last thing she wanted me to do for her before she died was to drive around and look at the barn quilts. I mean, what do you say to people like that?
Wow, that's powerful stuff there.
It is. I mean, isn't that a great reason for me to want to keep doing it?
It really is. It really is. And what you're doing is just really amazing. And how you started was just kind of getting a few 4-H clubs involved, and how it's just grown to this, and how you've touched people, basically, is what it comes down to. You've touched people's lives with your art, and I'm so happy that people can get out there and go see it. And again, it's just got to make you feel so good to have that kind of impact on people.
It has, and it's just been amazing to me. Like, that last story I told you. I mean, what better reason would there be for me to want to continue to do these than something like that? I mean, if it means that much to people, to have put a little extra joy in their life, when they're driving around or what have you, I mean, why not do it? And the fact that we do this on a volunteer basis makes it even more rewarding. I mean, people say, well, gosh, you should at least get paid something for this. Well, I tell them with every handshake and every smile or thank you that we get is worth more than any money we could ever get. I mean, and I mean that absolutely sincerely. I mean, whether I make people cry or not is immaterial. I know then it really means something to them. And when they smile and they say, oh, I just love it and all this stuff. And they do that all the time. And I mean, that's why I want to keep doing it. When I get a quilt done, I'm so anxious to get it hung up because I want the people's reaction, and I want them to know that I did it for them and was proud to do it. And not to brag, but I do take a lot of pride in the paint job that I do. I am very meticulous. I mean, I do any little tiny retouching I do, so when it leaves the chamber to go get hung up, it's as good as it can possibly be.
I want to thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. It's a great project, and I encourage anybody to get out there and see these beautiful quilts that are up all over Shawano County. And so, Jim, thanks again for coming on the podcast.
Oh, thank you. As you can probably tell, I enjoy talking about our project because it's been so much fun for both my wife and me, and we definitely want to see lots of people coming to Shawano County, not just to see the quilts, but it's a beautiful county, and we certainly welcome them.
Now's the perfect time to go see them. So thanks again, Jim. I want to thank Jim for joining me on the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. It's just such a great story, and you could just feel the passion that he puts into each quilt and how much it means to him to be a part of this program, and to watch this program grow from just a simple idea is truly, truly amazing. And the stories he tells about how people connect to the quilts, I think is really powerful. So I hope you get a chance to get out there and see some of these quilts this fall. And, like Jim said, take a trip this winter and drive through and see. Sometimes we get a little bogged down in the wintertime because of it being so dreary and gray all the time. Add a little color to your winter and drive around Shawano County and look at all these beautiful quilts. One thing I wanted to mention too is that Jim has put together a book of all the stories that he wrote for the paper. They're all in one book, and you can order that online, and I'll have a link to that in the show notes. I'll also put links to the show notes to the Shawano County website, where you can find more information about the quilts. And, if you're in Shawano, go ahead and stop at the Shawano County Chamber of Commerce, because they will have maps for you and give you more information. And you know what? Maybe if Jim's working on some quilts, maybe he'll even show you around and let you see his process. I hope you get out there and see the quilts as you become one of Wisconsin's outdoor explorers. Thanks again for joining me. I'm your host, Jason, and I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks for listening to the Wisconsin's Outdoor Explorer podcast. For more great information about being an outdoor explorer, visit our website at wisconsinsoutdoorexplorer.com. Be sure to check out the blog page and follow us on social media. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts.